I'm back. Excited to get back into the swing of things, Dave. We're going to catch me up on everything that I missed while I was away. We'll discuss the Samsonov deal, Matt Murray to Robidas Island. There's some current Leafs news that we got to get to about a couple of free agents that could have been Maple Leafs. We'll tell you who that was, all that more coming up on today's edition of the Locked On Leafs podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day.
You're Locked On Maple Leafs, your daily podcast on the Toronto Maple Leafs. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello and welcome into the Locked On Leafs podcast, a daily Maple Leaf-centric podcast hosted by myself, Mike DiStefano, and my co-host, Dave Morassutti, who did a fantastic job over the last few weeks locking things down here on Locked On Leafs. So appreciate you keeping this thing moving, Dave. I saw a lot of the comments were very, highly of you and of the guests that you brought on. So thank you also to the guests that came on. We'll continue Fan Friday. I like that. We got to keep getting, the fan base on. We'll get into the people on what's that app there that I'm blanking on right here? What's the app that we have where we talk to people, the chat group there? Discord, yes. We'll have to chat with some of the people on the Discord, some of the diehard everydayers that we got here on Locked On Leafs, and see if they want to join on Friday. So I think we're going to make that kind of a Friday special throughout the offseason, our Fan Friday. So if you are interested, let us know. Drop a comment down below here on YouTube, and perhaps we can get in touch and you can make an appearance on the next Fan Friday, which will be coming up in a couple of days. This episode is brought to you by the FanDuel Sportsbook. It's the official sportsbook of Locked On. To make every moment more, visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn today to get started. All right, buddy. Well, I was gone for 3 weeks, and not a whole lot happened. There was a couple of things. I was keeping a tally. I was kind of checking Twitter, checking to see what was going on, tuning in to Locked On to hear what you had to say. And so there was a few things, obviously. We can kind of go down the list of some of the big hitters, I suppose, of what happened over the last few weeks. And I could just get, some of my quick thoughts on what occurred. So, Dave, what do you think were some of the biggest headlines, I suppose, over the course of the last 3 weeks that I missed that I probably should touch on a little bit?
Well, goaltending. Goaltending was the number one topic because literally it was the only move that was made in that time. Like, I was not gonna lie, Mike, it was a struggle. There was please, I got excited for a Nick Abruzzese signing. Okay, that was the thing. And so I think if you look at the episodes since you left, I think a good 40% we're talking about goaltending. I think at least because I had the Brian Elliott potentially a potential option.
Oh, yeah. It got to a point. We're talking Brian Elliott reports. That's like the third, fourth goaltender on the depth chart, and that's where it got to because the news cycle was so dry. I know, man. I apologize, but I had a good time. I'm not gonna lie. I had a great time.
I don't blame you.
In Greece, and
your party's over.
Yeah, now it's over. Now it's time to get down to business. But you're right. The goaltending was pretty much the main storyline. The Leafs, they filled out the rest of their coaching roster as well, which we'll touch on in a moment. And you mentioned it, Abruzzese re-signing. That was just, I don't know if he's a guy who I necessarily have high hopes for. He's someone who's going to be a Toronto Marley this season, and maybe he'll get a call up at some point if injuries occur, but he's not someone who I picture into the Maple Leafs plans this season. Maybe, a season or two. He's got some ripening to do down in the minors before he gets to the NHL. But you're right. The goaltending was certainly the biggest, situation that had to get dealt with while I was gone. I think it was the day before I left is when the arbitration was set for Samsonov. Not the date, but the fact that Samsonov elected to take the Leafs to arbitration. And then they went and they gave their numbers. I was kind of surprised that it came in at 355, to be honest with you. I thought it was going to be a little bit higher than that. I thought that there was enough comparables in the $4 million range that the arbitrator would have awarded Samsonov a little bit more money. I think the Leafs got a little lucky on this one by only getting 355. Obviously, they were hoping to get a little bit lower. I think everybody would agree that would help their cap situation a lot. They're already over the cap, and getting Samsonov signed over $3 million certainly puts a little bit of a wrench into things. But I still think they're getting a number one goalie for a 1-year deal, short term. Last year, was it a flash in the pan, or is he ready to be, a really good 1A, which is what he was a season ago? A guy who can play 45 to 50 games. You have to have a tandem with him, but he could be the anchor the 1A who can play that, 45 to 50. So we'll see if he could do it for a second year, and then, he'll try and make some more money next season when he goes to hopefully doesn't get to the open market. Hopefully they can figure something out if he does have a good year and keep him around. If not, there is also Joseph Woll that they think could potentially be this team's goalie of the future. But the real interesting situation that happened between the pipes while I was away, to me, was Matt Murray landing on LTIR. Like, I don't know. We've talked about this and how, yes, this was a possibility, but it was more likely, that there would be some sort of buyout or a trade. Like, how surprised were you to see that LTIR in the middle of the summer ended up being the course of action for the Maple Leafs and their Matt Murray conundrum?
I didn't expect an announcement for the Leafs saying he is going to be on IR. And the interesting thing is the Leafs put out one thing and Elliot Friedman put out a totally different thing. If you notice.
Okay. I did notice, and Elliot's not wrong. Like, no. Being in the circles like that you and I are in, like we talk to some of the beat reporters, regularly sometimes. At least I was, during the playoffs, we were chit-chatting, and some of my former colleagues at TSN, when we're, some off the record conversations, we're just chatting on what we think will happen. A lot of people fully expected Matt Murray to end up on LTIR. Like, that was just a formality and it was going to happen. So based on how Elliot Friedman tweeted it out saying, as expected, Matt Murray now on LTIR for the rest of the season, there was rumors and talks that could be the case. I just wasn't sure, were they going to be able to do that? Because he was healthy to end the year.
Yeah.
And there wasn't like a freak skiing, water skiing accident or a tubing accident that he randomly got hurt again. So it's like, well, how can you manufacture some sort of injury? But I mean, at some point they're going to have to prove with medical records that there is an injury there and that he belongs on LTIR. Like, the league will certainly have to look at this, and I'm sure they'll have their I's and T's dotted and crossed so that they can put him on LTIR and everybody kind of wins in this scenario, except the Ottawa Senators. Suck it, Ross, and you sickos. But yeah, it works out. This is best case scenario for Toronto. Like, that, it very clearly is. That full cap hit, they end up with the relief with him going to LTIR, and they don't have to, trade a sweetener or a draft pick to move that contract. They didn't have to buy him out and have a dead cap next season. So this does end up being best case scenario. I was just a little kind of surprised that I guess it happened in the middle of the summer and that it was kind of just so open and honest. Like, yeah, he's just going to go to Robidas Island, basically.
Well, and here's the thing. People like surprised with the decision, but if you're Matt Murray and, if the Leafs came up to you and said, well, the options are you get bought out and you lose a good, decent chunk of money.
Yeah, it was like over $2 million, I think it was, right?
It was like 30% of his $8 million salary, I think, is what was reported. Yeah. You either do that, or we're gonna put you on LTIR. You get all the benefits of resources available to you. You get your full salary for the year. So I feel like there might have been a little bit of that going on too, right? It would have been nice if there was, I mean, let's say there was some sort of injury, like a la Robin Leonard, where, oh, he's getting hip surgery. He's going to be out for the year. Like something like that, it probably would have made things a little less dicey. But yeah, if in terms of I'm sure Matt Murray is not too worried about himself because he's going to get his salary.
Yeah, I mean, he's going to get paid. You know, it really only didn't work out for the Ottawa Senators. Like, ultimately, that's kind of the only team that. Yeah, that sucks.
You know how many messages you got? The same messages I did, obviously on Twitter. Of and we know who's behind the wheel, the Twitter account for Locked On Senators. So buyout time. You know, after the Samsonov buyout time. Yeah, maybe. Nope.
Wasn't buyout time. But yeah, so like that was really the big news. Like it was 3 weeks spent pretty much just like speculating, oh, what's the number going to come in for Samsonov? And then once that happened and the second buyout window was initiated, I guess it was okay, what's going to happen with Matt Murray? And right away they're like, yeah, nothing actually. He's going to go on LTIR. And then since then, yeah, really not much going on. Still a waiting game on William Nylander and Auston Matthews. They're still without extensions. Why don't we take a quick break and we'll come back and we'll get into that situation because that is a bit of a pressing need. We're now into August, and this is now where it's starting to get a little worried about things. So we'll kind of talk about that and chat about a couple reports coming out really from the horses' mouths themselves. A couple of tough guy free agents that Toronto apparently showed interest in on free agency, decided to not come to Toronto, and we'll tell you why that was in just a few moments. But before we do, let me tell you guys about one of today's show sponsors, and it's our pals over at FanDuel. Take your first swing at betting MLB on FanDuel and get 10 times your first bet amount in bonus bets up to $200. That's right. Just bet $20. You'll land $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. That's $200 you can spend on betting everything from the money line, the over-unders, who you think is going to get the first home run, all on an app that's safe, secure, and super easy to use. Plus, when you win, you can get paid instantly. There's no better place to bet on the MLB or the NHL than FanDuel. It's North America's #1 sportsbook. So sign up today and visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get up to $200 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel, the official partner of Major League Baseball and the Locked On Network. Welcome back into the Locked On Leafs podcast. I'm Mike DiStefano with Dave Morassutti. We are a daily Maple Leaf-centric podcast, so be sure to subscribe to us wherever you get your podcast from. Also on YouTube as well, where we can be found with new shows coming out 3 times a week for the next month or so. And then once we get back into training camp, we'll be back to the daily 5 shows a week schedule. So, Dave, something that is starting to really, I don't want to say concern me. Concern might be a little bit strong, but something that is starting to, creep up is this, Nylander and Auston Matthews contract standstill. The fact that neither have signed an extension, and we're now into the month of August. July 1st, I wasn't too worried. I thought that's more of an arbitrary, date. But I think even like back in June, I was saying, but if come August 15th, there's still no deal in place with either guy, then I'll start to get worried. Well, August 15th is only a couple weeks away now, less than 2 weeks away at this point. So there is a little something to be worried about at this point. Which one do you think is closer, I guess, right now? Would it be Nylander or Auston Matthews?
Well, I keep referring to Ellie Freeman kind of saying that he believes the Matthews one is going to get done. So it feels like that one seems like the better odds to get done. It just seems like Nylander and the Leafs have been kind of in this, like one's on one side, one's on the other, and it doesn't seem like any compromise has been thought about at this point. So I would probably think the Matthews one gets done first, and maybe that's what the Leafs don't want to do, is they don't want to get the Matthews one done first, because Matthews gets one number, We know what happens with the guy who comes after him. Oh,
Yeah.
right. So I guess I'm going to be getting closer to this much after you said this much. So I'm wondering if that's what's potentially taking so long, is that they want to get the Nylander one done first and then hopefully avoid the situation of a la Marner, when Marner decided, well, you gave Matthews this much. Why are you expecting me to give a discount if he didn't?
Yeah. Nylander's too busy clubbing in Spain right now. I ran into a fellow when I was in Rome. Fan of the pod, fan of Al's brother and all that. And he was chatting and he was telling me, he was like, "Yeah, I was in Spain last week and I ran into Nylander at a nightclub." I was like, "Oh, no way." Yeah, so that's what Nylander's been up to. He's not worried about contracts. He's out there partying, enjoying his offseason, having a good time.
Too. I did see he's golfing as well.
Golfing a whole lot.
Enjoy your
Yep.
summer. I get that.
No, absolutely. There's nothing wrong with it. I mean, I was doing the same thing when I was when I was out there on vacation. Like, this is his vacation. It's time for him to do what he wants. I mean, guy just popped off a 40-goal season. And if he's not worried about a contract for next year, I mean, you and I shouldn't be worried about it either, I guess. Like, he's the one who has the most to gain and lose. But we are getting to a point though where it is starting to get a little, skeptical on, okay, is something going to get done? And if not, is maybe the trade route, going to become an actuality here soon at some point? Like, if they just aren't anywhere near close to each other, like I'm still of the belief, and I've said this on this podcast many times, I don't think they can go into the season without an extension done with William Nylander. I don't think they can go to training camp without an extension done, because at that point, I think he walks next summer just to see what's out there. And he seems like the kind of guy that once you get to training camp, or when you get to the start of the season, he might break off talks. He might not want to do, contract negotiations during the season. And he might just want to see what's out there next summer. Like, he's waited this long. Why not just wait, another season and see what he can get next July? And for those reasons is why the Nylander one does kind of worry me a little bit more than the Matthews one. Because, I'm hearing the same stuff that you're hearing. It's pretty well done, somewhere between 3 to 5 years, somewhere between 13 and 14 million. It's just a matter of crossing T's and dotting I's, I guess, with Matthews. Or to your point, maybe it has something more to do with, we don't want to get that number out there because maybe that'll help Willie with his negotiations, which they very clearly are trying not to do. It's not a situation that we wanted to be in by August with both guys unsigned, but I don't know. Here we are. Like, what's the likelihood that this time next month, September 1st, 2nd, we're still sitting here without these two signed? Give me a percentage on it.
I think with Willie, the percentage of him not being like, I don't see, like, somebody brought up, I'll say one more thing before I get my percentage. You're like, well, David Pastrnak signed during the season. You can't compare David Pasternak's situation to Nylander's situation, right? I'm sure if the Leafs gave Nylander the Pastrnak contract, he's signed right now, but that's not the situation the Leafs find themselves in. Like, yeah. You can't, and like, maybe with Matthews, you can say that because Matthews signed during the season when he signed his last deal. I don't think with I think with Nylander, I think there's like a 10% chance he comes into camp without a contract. Like, I just don't think you can let this guy walk for nothing. And you can't play that idea of, oh, he really wants to stay. We're just going to play this. We're going to play the long game. We know Nylander's willing to wait it out. We've seen it before. Yes,
literally till the 5 minutes mark of when he was nearly ineligible to play the rest of the season. He was willing to go that far with it. So yeah, it's going to be real interesting with Willie. I think Matthews is done within a month. I think it's announced. I think it's signed, inked, registered with the league by this time next month. I think we're sitting here. Well, I've already had the conversation about the contract, what it does for the team, what it does for the structure, the cap moving forward, yada, yada, yada. And then it'll kind of turn into, what does this mean for William Nylander? And I think that conversation will certainly happen at some point here in the next little bit. All right. Why don't we take one more quick break, Dave? When we get back, couple little news nuggets, I suppose, that kind of came out today about a couple of Maple Leafs or a couple of players that the Maple Leafs showed interest in free agency and their reasoning for why they ultimately decided not to come play for Toronto. So we'll tell you who it was and why they decided to pass on the other side. I'm Mike DiStefano with Dave Morassutti. You listen to the Locked On Leafs podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Welcome back into the Locked On Leafs podcast. I'm Mike DiStefano with Dave Morassutti. Appreciate everyone for tuning in to the podcast today. Just a reminder, we're down to 3 shows a week for the next month or so. And then once training camp gets going and the hockey world starts up again, we'll be back to 5 shows a week. We'll be your daily go-to for all things Maple Leafs. And speaking of the Maple Leafs, they had a pretty busy July 1st and 2nd, we'll say. That weekend was busy, bringing in Klingberg and bringing in Reeves and Bertuzzi, Domi. Apparently they were talking to a lot more players as well. 2 guys in particular who they had spoke to and ultimately didn't sign, but did have interest in. One was Milan Lucic. The other was Radko Gudas. I got to be honest with you, Dave. Like, I look at those 2 players. I would have preferred Lucic over Reeves, first of all. And I might have preferred Gudas over Klingberg. Like, I might have preferred that, to be completely honest with you. I might take that back. That might be a bit of a strong take, but the season that Klingberg had last year and even the year before wasn't, the best. Gudas, what he was able to do for Florida, in these playoffs, just the way that he plays on the back end, the Leafs kind of need someone like that. And I look at the roster and if you swap those 2 players, those 4 players, I guess, I may actually like this Leafs roster a little bit better.
Like, no, I had a reflection moment in the car, really thinking about, because I listened to Lucic's comments on the Spin Chiclet podcast, and I'm like, You know what? I forgot that he went and played for Team Canada at the World Championships.
Yeah,
I forgot that he actually wasn't just out there skating around; like, he actually contributed a little bit. So I know, like, the age difference, I think Lucic is a year younger, but he signed a 1-year, $1 million contract. I think that's the first major reason why I would have preferred Lucic over Reeves. But the reason why, there's a couple of things, though, I'm wondering about that is he went back to Boston. He probably took less than maybe what was offered to go back to Boston. So for the Leafs, like, you're bidding up against him going back to a team that he spent the majority of his career with. So I feel like that might have been a tough one. I definitely would have preferred Lucic over Reeves, just because at least I can think that Lucic can provide some sort of offense as a 4th liner. Like, I'm not expecting a lot, but a lot more than Ryan Reeves.
You want a hot take?
All right.
I'm coming back from vacation with just like a
You came back from Italy and you're bringing that Italian spirit with you. I love it.
First of all, we're talking heats, dude. In Italy, it was grossly hot while I was the entire time. It was like in the
I've been there
every single day, chilling with 40-degree heat. When I was in Ibiza, it was 45 and humid. It was disgusting. So I'm bringing that heat that I experienced in Europe back to the pod here. I think Ryan Reeves gets waived at some point this season. Like, I don't even think he'd last the entire year in Toronto. And honestly, like, not that he won't get brought back up and be a part of this team, but like, even for cap reasons, like, you could save a decent amount of that cap. I don't think anyone's claiming Ryan Reeves at 1.3 for 3 more years. Like, I just don't think anyone's claiming that. So for the Leafs and their cap situation, you could kind of, do a little something similar to the way that they did a couple of years ago when they sent down Jason Spezza, and basically Spezza said, well, if anyone claims him, I'm going to retire. I don't know if Reeves is going to retire, but I don't think anyone's going to claim him anyway. But for like cap purposes, I wouldn't be shocked if he ends up getting waived. And whether he reports or not, maybe he pulls a Wayne Simmons, but he won't be on the active roster for a period of time while they do some cap gymnastics or, something occurs. That's my hot take, that Ryan Reaves will not be on, the active roster, and at some point he will be waived for the Maple Leafs. I really believe that.
When you were saying that, I'm like, oh, so they're going to go the Wayne Simmons route because, they want to keep Ryan Reaves around in some way, even if he's not on the playing on the ice.
Yeah.
It seems like, again, we talked about how expensive it was for the role that he's expected to bring. So, yeah, I mean, I could potentially see it because the Leafs are not exactly, in a comfortable position cap wise. So his contract could be one where, you could throw it down the minors if he's thrown on waivers. And if a team actually claims Ryan Reaves, I have to really question that general manager that actually puts in that waiver claim.
That wouldn't be a bad thing, man.
No, it would not be. No, not at all.
But I don't know, Ryan Reaves, and I believe I said it on our pod, after they made the Bertuzzi and the Domi signing, and even they brought in a couple other guys, it just seemed like Ryan Reaves then became a little bit of a luxury ad and somewhat expendable. And look, I know that no one punches faces like Ryan Reaves, I get it, but I don't know, man. I'm sour on that signing, and I think that there's a possibility that he ends up getting put on waivers at some point this year. But to go back to the Lucic and the Radko Gudas, the reasoning for them deciding not to come play, there were two different reasons. So Lucic was on the Spit and Chicklets podcast. This is where these comments came from, and basically said that he spoke to Brad Treliving, but essentially said, I couldn't see myself wearing a Maple Leaf sweater due to his Boston connection. He just, spent so much time in Boston and spent time hating Toronto while he was there, and being an enemy of the Maple Leafs and their fans, that he just could not see himself wearing a Maple Leafs uniform. And he's not an Ontario guy. He wasn't a Toronto-born kid or anything like that. So he doesn't have a connection to Toronto. I think he's a Vancouver guy, if I'm not mistaken. West Coast kid. But yeah, so he just straight up was like, I can't wear that uniform. Just not going to happen.
He was trying to pull Josh George's where he blocked. Remember, I don't know if you remember back in 2014.
Oh, yeah, when he was in Montreal.
He was with Montreal, and he's like, no, I been playing for Montreal for so long. I just basically resented the Leafs and would never ever wave my clutch. It was pretty much that situation. You play for a rival for so long, it's hard to go to the other side.
And then they trade him to Buffalo instead. And he had to go to Buffalo.
Hey, they're like, okay, you want to go to Toronto? We're sending you to Buffalo. So you keep digging in your heels here, Josh.
I mean, Toronto was terrible at that point, anyways. So it worked. Kind of worked out, I guess. But Radko Gudas, his was different. I sent you a message here, that a tweet, if you want to bring it up. Because this I thought was kind of an interesting, not interesting. I think that it's a lazy narrative, and it has to do with the media. Everyone, whenever I hear people talking about the media being a reason for why, players decide not to go, it just bothers me, So here's what he said. In an interview with Denick Sport, Radko Gudas said that he received offers from Calgary, Edmonton, and Toronto, but didn't want to play in Canada, especially in Toronto. He said that the media pressure in the playoffs was crazy. He felt it even though he only played for Florida and not Toronto. So basically, he didn't want to have to, play under the scrutiny of being a Toronto Maple Leaf. But why? Why not? I don't understand that. If you are an athlete, how could you possibly let media like that get into you? And why is it only with the Maple Leafs that this narrative creeps up? You never hear anyone saying, except for Vlad, actually, but that's a different reason. And you never hear anyone saying, I didn't want to play for the Yankees. I didn't want to play for the Dodgers because of the media. They take the money, they take the contracts, and they go, I didn't want to play for the Lakers. Who says they don't want to play for the Lakers because of the media? No one. They go and they play for the Lakers. LeBron James went and played for the Lakers because they're the freaking Lakers. Like, that's just what happens. You're Cowboys, like no one says, oh, I hate, being a Dallas because the media, it's too much. No, it never happens in any other sport. Only apparently in hockey do hockey players sit there and say, well, the Toronto media is too crazy. I don't want to play there. No way. That's insane. It's like, you're a pro athlete. You can't deal with the pressure of media? Come on. I hate when I hear that narrative come out. And like he said it, so clearly it's true. He did feel that way. And we also heard the same kind of sentiment from Ryan O'Reilly too. And I just don't get it. Like, how could you be wired that way where the media dictates, where you're going to live and where you want to play and whether or not you want to play for a contender over, a different team? It's wild to me.
I'm going to insult Radko Gudas a little bit here, but if you really think the media pressure is bad for you, like, I'm sorry, you're like little P in comparison to Auston Matthews, Mitch Marner, William Nylander, John Tavares, Morgan Riley. Like,
yes and no.
Pressure,
yes
but like,
and no, though, Dave.
How many media members though are going to be going after Radko Gudas or trying to get one-on-ones with Radko Gudas?
Guy, how many times did we sit here and crap all over Justin Hall?
Oh, I know.
That's what I mean. Like, the guy plays bad. If he comes in and he's terrible, he's going to get chirped and he's going to be held accountable by the fan base.
You're a good hockey player, and the media is not going to be that problem for you.
Well, yes, you're right. Like,
it wasn't like let's say this. It wasn't like the media attention that Justin Hall was unjustified, right? Like,
right.
It was fair. So if your issue is you don't like,
the thing is, you can be terrible on some of these other teams, and like no one cares. You know what I mean? Like, you could be bad in Philadelphia. Not really Philly.
No,
but
you can't be bad in Philadelphia. That's
not in Philly. But you could be bad in Florida. I mean, this year is different because they went on a cup run. But like, you could be bad in Florida, and no one's saying, like, they have like 3 beat writers. Like, you know what I mean? Like, no offense, but there's not a large contingent that's covering them and holding the team accountable. Like, it's not there. The interest isn't there. But for Toronto, it is 100%. And it doesn't matter who you are.
Too.
Canada,
it's a Toronto thing apparently now.
Well, he said especially Toronto, which is, I think, what.
Because he has that experience. He didn't really have the experience in Edmonton or Calgary. And to me, it speaks to a bigger issue, which is, in terms of the league, which is your team players don't want to go to the biggest media markets, which is terrible for the league. Like, if you, let's say, Leo Messi, I was bringing him up earlier when we were having our pregame. Imagine if Leo Messi just like, you know what? I don't want to go to Miami because I don't want the pressure of Miami, or like,
let's go to Cincinnati.
I want to go to or Kansas City. You think MLS would be happy about that? And they shouldn't be. You want your stars. I hate to say this and sound Toronto, and people who hate Toronto on the podcast, when we get those people in the comments, I see you. The league should want the Leafs to thrive because it's good for the league. It is, in my opinion. So if you see a player say, I don't like the idea of going to Toronto because the media is too much for me, to the NHL, if I'm the NHL, I'm like, that's not something we want to hear.
Grow a pair. That's what I say.
Yeah, that too. Like, come on.
Like,
you're being paid to play hockey. Like, it's not like you're like you're a professional athlete. You're supposed to be at the top of the crop in terms of hockey players in the world. And media spotlight is something that's going to make you shake out of your boots, make you worried about playing the game that you should feel very confident in your ability of playing.
Yeah, it shouldn't be a deterrent. Absolutely should not be a deterrent for why you don't sign in a particular market. And, well, sounds like that's what happened for Radko Gudas and for Ryan O'Reilly. And, I mean, hey, whatever happened, you move on. And at some point, though, the Leafs still do need to address some sort of size on the back end. That's kind of the one last, I guess, check mark that we're looking for to finish off Brad Treliving's offseason. And I don't know where it's going to come from, whether it's a trade, if there's anyone on the open market. I'd have to take a look. I haven't had a chance to see who's out there in the secondary, tertiary wave of free agents. I know you did that on the show the other day, talking about what Josh Cloak wrote about of The Athletic. But so maybe that's something that we can get into a little later this week. Maybe some guys that Toronto could maybe target in the bargain bin deals late in the summer. But I think that'll do it for us here today, pal. I'm happy to be back on the show, back in the swing of things. And I was worried that I would forget how to do this thing. It's been a while, pal. But again, appreciate you for taking the bull by the horns here last few weeks. Did a great job. Got the content out to the people, and I know the people appreciate that as well. So, and thank you also to the listeners. We've grown a lot over the last little bit. And even while I was gone, we gained, I think a couple hundred more subscribers on YouTube, and we're getting more listens every day on the audio podcast, which is available wherever you can find your podcast at. And it's great. I'm happy for it. We're going to keep this thing rolling all the way through the summer, try and get you all of the information that you want, and hopefully a little entertainment along the way as well. But that'll do it for us here today on the podcast. I'd like to thank you all so much for listening and supporting the show. You can subscribe to the Locked On Leafs podcast on all podcasts and platforms and receive daily Leafs content. Follow myself on X. Do I have to say X now, Dave?
No, absolutely not.
Follow myself on
Twitter.com when I enter it in, so it remains Twitter.com until they change that URL.
All right, whatever that app is now called, you can find me at Mickey_Canuck. You can find Dave at D_Morassutti. Follow the show account as well. Locked On Leafs. Leave a like on this video if you enjoyed it. Leave a comment down below. Your thoughts on what we had to talk about today. And we'll be back with another episode for y'all tomorrow. But until then, keep it locked right here on Locked On Leafs.